Outer Orange.
Yes, time for me to gush about V Premium. Welcome back, guys. OuterOrange here. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be discussing V Premium. Recently we had the BRO event that someone happened to be commentating for. That's right. So I commented for BRO with good old Toku and Philip. We didn't. I think we did an awesome job. But it seemed like it was really fun. I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys had a lot of fun. But anyway, so we commentated V Premium, and now you might be asking yourself, why did these decks top? Well, I'm here to help you answer that question. We're gonna kind of go down the list. We're gonna have some pie charts, the decks, you know, the topping and all this stuff, and I'll kind of explain to you what these decks are doing and what the techs are doing. So that's pretty much what we're gonna do today. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start with some pie charts. Let's go. Pie charts. You know I love pie charts. Here I am with a pie chart, and I do want to give a nice special thank you to Fuzzy Paradox for the pie charts. This is the AO region for Bureau 2021 top 8. As you guys can see, we had 4 Bermuda Triangle, 2 Shadow Paladin, 1 Grand Blue, and 1 Murakumo top in this specific in this region. You'll notice we have a very heavy Bermuda Triangle, and I will kind of go over why Bermuda Triangle is so heavy. We have 2 Shadow Paladin. Shadows is actually doing relatively well. Luard is the main focus of the Shadow Paladin decks that we'll be seeing. Luard is a good deck, and it will be good. It outscales Bermuda Triangle as long as they hit their stuff, and I think that's the main focus of why Shadow Paladin decks are winning here. And it's just good to see it. We're gonna see some Grand Blue. This is the Night Rose variant. Grand Blue has always been in a good spot since Night Rose has come out, and it's just kind of stayed there, as it has a lot of way outs out of some decks where they can farm, they can deal with Hamiel, they can deal with Angel Feather, they can beat Prism, because Prism can only have so much hand to deal with Skull Dragons. So just in general, they're in a good spot. Probably not the best deck right now, but it's definitely up there. It's right below the big boogeymen, so it's really good. And then we have one deck in here that's a little bit more of a shock to some people, and that is Murakumo, and this is specifically a Sue that has a top. And you guys might be wondering why in the world this deck is topping. I'll kind of explain where the deck's relevance kind of comes in and what it does that just helps it top from my personal experience, but we'll kind of go into that probably when we see the actual deck profile. Going on in, we have EU. You'll see there's a little bit more diversity here. We have 3 Bermuda Triangle, 2 Link Joker, 1 Shadow Paladin, 1 Angel Feather, and 1 Narukami. I really like the fact that this one's a little bit more diverse, as surprisingly enough, the decks that are on this list, I expected to see. A lot of people might find it shocking to see Link Joker on these lists, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's not that shocking at all, actually. Link Joker has been doing well this entire time. Since the release of the Link Joker, the newer Messiah, the Alter Ego Messiah, the deck has always been in a good spot, and then recently they got a promo that only made it better, but the deck before the promo was still able to high roll and kind of kill you. Now, granted, if you don't see certain pieces fast enough, you can see yourself losing, but the deck itself isn't bad by any means. Something that may be a little bit more of a surprise to people is actually the Narukami deck, which is actually Vanquisher. Vanquisher is an interesting deck. Vanquisher does a lot of manipulation with binding and stuff like that, and against certain matchups it's actually really good. Some decks really want to see their cards on the board, some of them which is Prism and Pawn, like Pawn type decks, and Vanquisher just says, nah, like, I'm just gonna bind your stuff, I'm gonna draw a ton from it, and I'm just gonna do my own stuff. And honestly, just that kind of disruption isn't too bad in this type of format. And then we also have Pawn. Pawn has really huge numbers. Pawn has that mix of being like Skull Dragon attacks with like some shield, and because of that, a lot of people have been taking Pawn, as it can deal with Prism, it can deal with Angel Feather, kind of all in one go. Angel Feather and Prism being the boogeyman of the format right now, but the Pawn decks can win. Now, the only downside to Pawn decks is that it's extremely high roll. You're running very little grade 1, very little grade 2, and a lot of grade 3, but it is powerful, and that's why we do see it here in the ratings. It is not surprising. There's also an Angel Feather list in here, no surprise at all. Everybody knows how Angel Feather is doing. It does have kind of like a brickiness to it, but the deck is still good, and now I think it's even better. The deck has so much consistency now. The new stuff that they added, I think, made the deck even better. I think the support was meant to be for the Celestials, and then it just works so beautifully in Gavriel. NA, which is the one I commentated for. This one also a little bit more diverse than the AO one. We have 3 Bermuda Triangle, 2 Shadow Paladin, 1 Grand Blue, 1 Angel Feather, 1 Aqua Force. We kind of went over the other ones, so I'm just going to go right into the Aqua Force one. This is probably the one people were expecting the least. This is a Malice Storm deck. I'm going to go into detail about this deck. Toku, the person I commentated with, went on a whole storm about it, and I don't mind going on a storm about it too, as much as I get it, a storm because it's blue, Malice Storm. Anyway, this deck has some stuff that it counters, and it's actually good because it can counter certain elements. And honestly, the deck isn't terrible in a lot of situations, and even more so now with Heal Guardians being more apparent, this deck actually does have kind of like a late game win con. Just be a big disclaimer, even though I do know the format pretty well, there is one deck that I don't know as well, and that's actually Shadow Paladin. I've never played Blue Ward ever in my life. I've never played a Shadow Paladin deck ever in my life, so it may be harder for me to explain what the techs are, but I can at least tell you what the actual deck itself is doing. So we'll just a heads up. But anyway, let's go ahead and start. All right. So here we have AO. Now I do also want to make another disclaimer. I do have 1 through 4 in order for AO and NA, but after that, the 5 through 8 players, they are kind of a little bit more scrambled. EU is the only one that's actually in order because that's just how the spreadsheet is. The other ones are, I don't know in what order 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th place got. Yeah, so here's first place. This is GG. That got with their Luard deck. They did get into first place, and here's the deck essentially. And you'll notice there's not a lot of mumbo jumbo in this deck. It's just very straightforward. You search for your pieces, you get your draws, you go into your Luards, you do your Murfessa stuff, very little grade 2, a lot of grade 1 pressure, and then you have your counter charging elements, you have your searching elements, you have your extra ways, like you have the intercept, just extra ways to have shield value, and you just kind of push. Now, why in the world is Luard topping? Why has Luard been topping? Well, Luard is actually one of the best decks to handle Prism, in my opinion. It doesn't necessarily win against Prism, but it just handles Prism better. It is a very good overall force deck that just deals with a really good acceleration. The deck just gets stronger and stronger as the game gets later and later. They're constantly getting force markers. Everything attacks for 2 crits. You have a shield to kind of back you up. On top of that, you also have just this multi-attacking engine going, and you're just constantly adding pressure. Your every single turn, aside from your first ride up, essentially is going to be pretty aggressive, and you'll notice that's kind of what these decks are doing. You also notice a lot, this deck in particular especially, is going on a full aggressive search engine. They want to hit their Luard, because as long as you hit Luard, you're kind of okay, but if you miss Luard, your entire game plan starts falling apart, and that is pretty much what a lot of these decks are doing. I'm not going to go into like the specifics exactly. The deck's just good. You can kind of tempo things out. You can deal with, I have heard Luard players tell me that dealing with Prism is hard, but I personally believe as a Prism player that, you know, Prism has all these 5 attacks, all this blah blah blah, yada yada, but most of them are, you know, 1 damage, whatever. And yeah, they have like a hand size, but Luard is like, yeah, I do kind of similar stuff. It's a little bit smaller number, my hand size isn't as big, but they're constantly 2 crit pressure, and that 2 crit pressure will eventually start killing you, whereas Prism has to take a little bit longer to do that, and that's why I think where kind of difference is. But that's just my personal opinion. Like I said, I'm not a Luard player, so I'm not going to go into like depths about specifically why, but the deck is just a good force deck. In second place, we have a Highlander Prism deck. Now this is one of the few decks that is different from a typical Prism deck, and you'll see here because there's a lot of one-ofs. Now this deck plays, and I could go on to a whole rant. Now normally Prism decks play where you have the full engine of Prisms, and then you have the Aquas and the Lizelots, and they're doing their thing, and you're doing your stuff every turn, and you're kind of just doing the same thing over and over again. This deck is a little different as it plays a bunch of one-ofs. It has a Lupina, an Anj, a Nectaria, Q-Tire, it's got Aqua at 3, it's got Sedna, it's got Ellie, it's got all these little some of these one-ofs like Spina and Sistico and all this other stuff. Why in the world are they doing this? They're doing this because the way this deck works is that it filters these cards out, the 2 and the 1, like pretty much instantly. Like you get these cards out really fast. As long as you have like 1 left in deck, it's like whatever, right? And then after that, you can start declaring cards. You can just be like, okay, I'm gonna use Q-Tire and I want to get Aqua. I'm gonna use Q-Tire and I'm gonna go get Spina. I'm gonna use Q-Tire and I'm gonna go get like an Ellie if I've already gone through a bit of Ellie's. I'm gonna use Q-Tire and maybe grab this, grab Finessa. Whatever it is, you kind of just go and grab. I'm gonna use Q-Tire and go grab Lupina to finish my opponent next turn. You know what I mean? You can kind of plan ahead a turn instead of constantly doing the same thing. And you can also surprise your your opponent with this, because your opponent is going to sit here and be like, oh, they're just gonna, you know, like they're just gonna do the same thing over and over again, and you're like, nah fam, I'm gonna drop this Q tire, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Sometimes the opponent is gonna try to like, deny you counterblast, and you're gonna be like, okay cool, I'm gonna Q tire, I'm gonna pick up this card right here, this Biana right here, and I'm gonna say screw you, now I countercharge. You know what I mean? On top of the fact, the very interesting thing about this deck is that it can bring back Heal Guardians. Now the regular one can bring back Heal Guardians too. I'm bringing this up because I just think this is such an important tool. You can literally use this card to bring back your Heal Guardians with this. So essentially you put it on the rear guard, and then if you have one in drop, you put the one in drop pretty much just back to deck. It's really useful. It means you have more, you're playing more than 4 heals essentially, and it's just a very nice technique. We have another Lubar deck. I'm not going to go too far into this. I do see kind of like a similar engine here. They are running their searchers, they're running their in soul, put a grade 1 for your drops into soul to give this thing 3k just to replenish your soul, all this kind of stuff. You just usually have your intercept stuff. You got your if you have extra power that some of these grade 1s get. Of course you have your searcher 1 and searcher 2, you have more Fessa, and then you have the other grade 2 that's ideal, which is Counterblast Call grade 1 when it's placed, so you can kind of just, you know, cycle through multi-attacking, all this other stuff, or just get grade 1s on the board, so you can start doing your engine with your Luards. Now this one does run the 4 and 4 here. They chose that they just want to see both as soon as possible, so they went for the 4-4, whereas the other deck went for the 3-4, so I mean 4-3. And this is Andre. I forgot to name the names so far. GG's was first, Manlong was second, now we're on Andre, which is Lee. Good old Grand Blue, would you look at that? Good old Grand Blue, my heart, my soul, my happy spot right here. Here it is, guys. Good old Grand Blue. Now this deck runs 3 Beatrice, 3 Skull Dragon, and 4 Night Rose. This is very surprising. A lot of people usually cut these between 3 and 2, especially now with Banshee out. You could keep this at 2, keep this at 2, and then use Banshee to, you know, mill out your selective mill that you want to do. But, you know, I do understand why you do want to see these cards like ASAP, and you'll notice they have kind of like a mill engine going on here. They have 4 of these and 3 of these. They're pretty much milling as fast as they can, so that way when they do get to their Night Rose turn, they can just go ballistic. Now, another thing to keep in mind, in case you want to go a little bit defensive, you can actually ride into Beatrice. That's probably why they have the 3rd copy of Beatrice, is what I'm assuming. I don't know, but I can see why, because you'll notice they have Cyril the Ghosty in here, Damien the Ghosty in here, and they have Jesse the Ghosty in here, and Rick the Ghosty in here. So they can go into a Beatrice engine if they want to, or if they feel they need to go into a defensive spot, they can do that. So say Angel Feather is about to have a big cameo turn, you can ride Beatrice, call out a Jesse, go from Jesse into Damien, go from Damien into Rick the Ghosty, offer 1 counterblast, and now you have an interceptor that you can use to deal with Hamiel, which is just really fun stuff, because sometimes Hamiel is a little bit too strong, and you kind of have a way to just deal with that kind of stuff. I'm assuming that's the goal here, but the main focus is definitely, you know, the onslaught that Night Rose brings. And you also have Cyril the Ghosty here, which is a really good shield in hand. A lot of Grand Blue players have been contemplating with Night Rose builds with this in here, so this is not too surprising to see. It is a 10k power, 10k shield, so it becomes 20 on Beatrice. It's 25, so it's a very high shield value. Running these kind of helps you, but you do need to have 15 cards in drop, so you really need to Navigator push like as soon as possible to kind of really make the card shine. But overall, this list is fine. Noticing that they only run 9 grade 2s. Honestly, Grand Blue is in this weird spot where like the grade 2s are just not that great. Like even in my opinion, even Column Bar is not that great. So like your grade 3s and grade 1s carry pretty much do the carrying in a lot of these decks, so it's not too surprising. Wait, that's Siberia here. Let's go ahead and see some of these other decks. This is pretty much 5 through 8 now. So we got another Prism deck. Now this one's way more standard. It's got pretty much the usual stuff. It is a little bit with a couple 1-ofs in here. Not really too sure why this one has the 1-ofs, but hey, they did pretty well with it. I do see some cycling going on here. This is the Psycho Girl. When your grade 3 is placed during battle phase, the second ability will never go off since you're never placing anything. At least with this deck, there's no other grade 3, but Vert never places during battle phase. At least herself, like she never places during battle phase, because there's a Vanguard specific thing. I used to play as card reviewer. So, but yeah, that's that. And they do run these 2. I guess it's just for more filtering to search what you need to search for. It's also a good Vanguard target, you know, if you just want to play like that. This isn't too bad. I noticed a lot of people running Steza. Steza is not terrible. She lets you put a grade 3 from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck to draw a card. You can literally put your freaking G guards back to deck. You have to do it put a bottom. That's why I think Spina is a little better, because Spina can let you put can let you shuffle on top of that. This just forces you to be at the bottom, but you know, you're going to be searching and doing other things, so it's not terrible. All that stuff. running 2 Sedna and just all this other stuff. I kind of like this. I like this combination here of putting grade 3s to the bottom, which is a lot of what these 2 cards are essentially doing. It also replenishes your soul a little bit, stuff like that. I don't know how crazy I am a fan of you losing your rear guards for this, but it's not terrible. I think this card's a little bit more fun, but it is, you do have to retire, you draw, and then you draw another. This one gets you a draw 2, this one gets you a draw 1. A lot of this engine is just a big plussing engine, to be honest. Like, the deck already pluses, and this deck just says, here, plus some more. Next, we have another Prism list. This is pretty much the standard. This is Kevin Cho. So this is Kevin Cho. This is the same person that topped in the NA one, and we're going to be seeing this exact list a lot. So I'm going to just kind of briefly talk about this. This is like the standard Prism list to kind of go for. The only big difference that has changed between this list and maybe some lists in Springfest is the Heal Guardian and the amount of Spinas to run. It used to be that you only run like 1-2 Spinas max. You know, you had like a little bit more flex spots, but the reason why they're running more is because this card can pretty much bring this card back to deck. So you can just essentially loop this back and forth, and it's just great with the Aqua. This deck is just very like, I'm just not going to brick that much, and I'm just going to hit my stuff, and I'm going to do what I want. They also have the Nectaria now in here. Nectaria just really helps with just, if you see it early on, you can just increase your bind zone like crazy fast and just kind of do what you want. And it's overall just a nice little engine to use. I like Nectaria. Well, some people hate this card, some people love this card. There really is no in between. But if you really want to truly understand how Prism works, this is probably the best list you can go for right now. I don't think there is a better way to build the most standard version of this list, if that makes sense. I do think if you want a higher ceiling, then the Highlander list might do you better. Especially we'll be seeing one, I don't know if we'll be seeing in here, but there's some people that want Pearl Sisters, just, you know, to have that extra crit pressure on the board, and that's also really awesome. But we'll be seeing this list again. So just keep in mind, if you truly want to understand Prism, this is the list go to. And if you want to know why it tops, it gets huge hand, like 16, 17 cards in hand, high pressure, just high numbers. It beats your face, and it just does the same thing over and over again. That's why this list is topping. That's why it's here. That's why it's doing so well. Next, we have Karen Patel with another Shadow Paladin list. This is a more max rarity list. Actually, I think it is max rarity. Pretty sure this is max. It looks max rarity to me, so I'm pretty sure it is max rarity, unless there's something I'm missing here. Pretty much a max rarity list. We've seen Karen Patel recently in premium as well, so that we're seeing them again. You'll notice that they are just going for a more grade 1, less grade 2 here. So they do have a little bit less grade 2s, because my understanding is that they just think the grade 1s is just the better approach, which is completely understandable. You want to see your grade 1s as soon as possible. So that's what they're doing here. They're running more Abyssal Owls in conjunction to lowering on Morfessa. They do have the max out on the Searchers, and pretty much it's very similar to what we've kind of already seen. Let's go ahead and talk about 0315. This is the last list. This is the Yasue list. Now, why in the world is this list winning? This list, people have been just kind of low-key sleeping on Yasue like this entire time. If you're asking me, I have been playing someone who has been playing Yasue pretty much a good majority of this time. So I've already known that this deck was good. Now, why is it good? Well, you have a lot of pressure from turn 1 to 3, pretty much. You have the Shirayuki on hit, not hit pressure going on. You have like the pieces, the searching that's going on. You have the deck thinning that happens with the cloner right here. This guy pretty much takes a name, essentially clones it, and becomes that name, so you can use this. You have the Shirayukis that give you a ton of shield, and then you can also negate your opponent. And we are in a Heal Guardian meta right now, so when you lower your opponent's Vanguard, it actually matters even more, because your opponent doesn't have 20k shields. They're gonna die a lot faster, and especially if they're playing something like you're playing against Protect or something like that, you guys are both in the same base, the guarding sucks even more. So when you start Shirayukiing them, they're gonna start losing a lot faster, because they don't have a good way to guard when they're already at like -2, -5, or if they're at 2 or at 3, whatever it is that their Vanguard ends up being at. This deck hits like a freaking truck. You draw a ton with your Ogre, you ride into this, you re-ride into this. You can even board disrupt a little bit with the second one here, because when it attacks, it gets 10k and it sends something to the bottom, so you can, you know, disrupt the board a little bit. Like if you're playing against Prism or Lure or whatever, you may want to disrupt a little bit, and you can do that with this card. And there's just so many little things that this deck just does. Now, there is a little addition here. They are running this card right here. This is from clan selection. I think this card's good. It says when it doesn't hit, put this unit to the bottom of your deck, choose one of your opponent's unit, put it to the bottom. But it also has a first skill which says Carablast, reveal a grade 2 or less from your hand, and you search your deck for the exact same card and call it to the rear guard circle. So essentially you can start you can set up your board a little bit faster and do all this stuff. You'll notice this doesn't run the Momomaru, I think it's called. The promo is the promo that says If you have the same card name as it on the board, you get 10k, so essentially they just get high. You'll notice that this deck doesn't run it, and obviously it doesn't seem like it needs it. I do think that this little setup is just nice because you can constantly just, one, you can board, you can wipe your opponent, you can slowly wipe your opponent's board with this card, but two, you can also get a free unit to the board by just revealing a grade 2 or less, and you can just get whatever you want. So it's like a toolbox deck, and you know, you reveal a grade 2 or less, what in the world do you think you'd be searching for? Oh, I don't know. Awazu. You would search for Awazu because Awazu says when placed, search for another card, and then Yasue also searches, and then you have like a free board. You barely used your hand, you have a free board, and you just go, and you just go. You start slamming your opponent down with fronts and, you know, your triggers, all this stuff. It's a very fun deck. It's a very fun deck, and I think people have just not been aware that this deck can exist and just do stuff. And now with the Cherokee being unbanned, it can do stuff. Like, people have just been like, I guess people just kind of, because it hasn't been getting too much support, no one's really thought about this deck too much. But I'm not gonna lie, the 2 grade 2s that have come out, they both work relatively well. You can use them, so have at it. If you're a Yasui player out there, I highly recommend trying it out. Now granted, this deck does have some bad matchups, mainly like Angel Feather, stuff like that. I do think this deck loses to those types of matchups, but you can Cherokee and heal guard on top of that. I think if you have a Yasui deck out there, you should definitely try rebuilding it, you know, bring it back to life. But that's pretty much our top 8 for AO. So here we have EU. This is first place. This is Pierre with a Luar deck, another Luar deck. Surprise, surprise. Yes, it is topping. Again, they are running a little bit different. They do run the bat in this one, which is just your little multi-attacking engine, as it just lets you call it just helps you have like a more attacks and all that stuff. So that is the only big difference here that we'll see about this deck with the other deck. I think this is also a nice little engine here, which is the router. It says when played, Soul Blast, call a 0 from hand and draw a card. So this is kind of interesting. I'm not really too sure what exactly you'd be calling off of this, and please someone in the comment, please tell me why or when you would find use in this, because I'm not seeing it. But like I said, I'm not a Shadow Paladin main. I only know the main stuff that the deck does, so it would be nice to hear what you would want to call off of this, or when this would become of use at any given point. I guess it's a free rear guard to the board, but you're calling it from hand, you're drawing. Maybe you're just getting better pieces. I'm not really too sure. Feel free to tell me. This is Brian's list. This is Pawn, doing pawn things. So this is let's talk about pawn a little bit. Why is pawn good? Well, you ride this card that gives you an extra protect. If you go second, you pretty much get an extra marker. It could be an excel, it could be a protect, it could be a force. Why does that matter? Well, that means you can attack 4 times now, which is really good. So you can attack 4 times essentially, and then on top of that, she also inherits all the skills of your other melody cards during each main phase, right? So you can have all your Finas and Karos and Sonatas and Cannons and Soul, and now you have like a really high shield, you have a really high power, you have guard restricts, because Kanan over here has a guard restrict. So blast 3, your opponent has to guard with 2 cards for every attack until the end of the turn. So you have all this little extra going on, and it's just really good, really strong. The downside, as I mentioned before, you'll notice the grade 2s here, 8 grade 2s and 8 grade 1s, which means your chances of G-assisting is relatively high. Though as long as you hit this card right here, the chances of you G-assisting lowers. But if you miss this card, you kind of just miss your whole engine. This is a rear guard only skill, so you can't use this one, at least for its searching ability. It only searches 1, and you have to reveal a grade 3, but that's the easy part. And this deck does deal with Angel Feather really well. It deals with Prism very well. Prism has a big fan, but how many times can it take 70k to the face? Not that many times. It'll eventually start losing. So that's why decks like this really help. This deck literally screams, do you have PG? You don't, you die. So that's why this deck does pretty well. We have a Link Joker list. So here's the Link Joker stuff that finally could talk about it kind of in depth here. So this is kind of like this is what I was talking. This is the Boogeyman right here. This is the Valko Boogeyman. This card essentially attacks like crazy. It gets 10k power, becomes a 40k beater in your face. If you get this on turn 1, you kind of already secured the game. Like you're gonna keep smacking your opponent with this thing. Your opponent can't guard it, and you just kind of win. You also have this engine of like unlocking and relocking, so you can multi-attack with this. It's really good. You can go force 2 with this deck, kind of slam your opponent down. And then you have this funny card right here. You have this really funny card. It says when it is unlocked, you can counterblast, reveal the top card of your deck, and put it to hand. If it's a grade 3, discard 2 cards from your hand and stand your Vanguard. So this is your little high roll tech. We can restand your Vanguard, make your Vanguard attack again, on top of the fact that you have this boy out. And if you have like 2 of these out on the board, it's kind of just GG. Like this deck can freaking steamroll you out of nowhere, and I think it's spooky. This deck spooks me. I do not like facing this deck. This deck always keeps me on my toes. So I personally think it's a really strong deck. And then they did get I believe this is the promo right here. Pretty sure this is the PR. I could be wrong. Yeah, this is the PR that came in the Coin Collection. This is the new PR. Yeah, helps you unlock, helps you draw, you know, put a card from your hand, you know, as locked, all this other stuff, and then you can unlock a card and you soul charge. You gotta do all this stuff with it. It's just another little extra engine to Link Joker. Obviously very good. So yes, nice job here. I like seeing the Link Joker decks. I think people really underestimated Link Joker, especially this version. This is the Messiah version. Of course, the Chaos Breaker and the other ones aren't as good, but I do think this deck definitely has really good chances of succeeding. Well, that was Riot. This was Riot, and then this is Tovoshin Tugalga. I'm so sorry. I said your name wrong. I'm so sorry. But yet another deck. I think this is almost even the same. The only difference is that they went for the high roll super aggressively. They said, I want to see the high roll, and they also ran the grade 3 here. You can unlock with it, but you know, honestly, part of why you're running it, you unlock with it and you also just run it literally just for this. You run it for this too, because you don't have that many grade 3s, right? But you know, you want to hit them, so you can hit them with this and just kind of end game, restand your Vanguard a second time. Your opponent's probably going to die, but essentially the similar concept of your Valko, you know, you want to see your Valko as soon as possible, and you just kind of do stuff off of that. Next, we have Mivrin. This is another Highlander with a touch of with a touch of that. This is another Highlander Prism list essentially, and I talked about the Pro Sisters. Here are the Pro Sisters. This is that high ceiling we were discussing earlier. This deck will outplay most Prism decks if they hit their pieces fast enough. Now they can brick because they are trying to search for these one-ofs, and if you see the damage, you kind of just struggle. You'll notice that it's a very similar engine. They have run the Q-Tire. Essentially, you're searching. You can go into an Orange, into a Cho, and kind of do like some other plays with this as well. So they're running this one-off engine here. I don't know about this because that means you have to hit it. A lot of this, I feel like this deck is a little bit more piece reliant because you have to hit this, and then late game, if you want to go into this, you would have to go into Anj and then use Anj's skill to go into Cho. And I do think that that's a lot of stuff that you have to do in a specific order, and you won't always see that condition. I think the biggest win con here is definitely the 2 Pearl Sisters. As they become 2 crits on the board, you can constantly keep bouncing them back, so you never lose them and all this other stuff. Like I said, the downside is I think this part right here. I think outside of this deck's actually really cool, really awesome, really good stuff. I do like the shredding of the Lieselot. I personally am not as big of a fan as Lieselot as I used to be. I low-key kind of like not seeing her. A lot of people running Sistico. She says one place you could put a normal unit from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck. If you put a grade 3 or greater, choose one of your opponent's rear cards, and that unit cannot stand for your next opponent's stand phase, which is really fun stuff. But mainly you're putting a grade 3 back to deck, which will be probably a Heal Guardian, and then you can also, you know, you can return any player's card's hand, and this unit gets 10k, so you can return your own to then reuse some skills. So just a nice little one-of that you can do in the little mini polarization that Mega Colony likes, but in a Bermuda Triangle card. But we're not going to keep talking about this. This is just like, we've seen a lot of these lists right now, so we're just going to kind of go right into some other decks here. This is Chan. It's another mini Highlander version as well. We have the Sistico again, we have the one-ofs going on, we have the Nectaria, we have the Q-Tire. Again, another list that is focused on having that little Highlander engine going on here. So very fun stuff, We're not going to go too deep into it. We kind of discussed all these cards already in depth. We talked about the Stezas, the Spina, the Heal Guardian, putting back to deck, all this other stuff, the Sistico. So we're not going to go too far in depth, but congratulations to everybody, by the way. I haven't had a chance to say this, but congratulations to being the top 8 in any region. So props to you. Y'all are awesome. Here we have Nuno. This is the Vanquisher list. So Nuno is actually someone I've talked to on Twitter and stuff like that before, so it's really awesome seeing them hit the top tables as well. Some of these people I've talked to briefly, but I think I've spent more time with Nuno on Twitter just talking about random stuff. But here's the Vanquisher list. So you can bind with this card. You can bind with these cards, you know, force your opponent to bind. You can draw a ton, put stuff into soul, you can multi-attack, you can get excel markers. There's a lot of stuff that this deck just kind of does, and this is a full max rarity deck. Wow, full max rarity here, but very cool stuff. You can bind your own stuff, you can retire one of your opponent's rear guard, you can bind one of your opponent's rear guards, which is kind of what this card is doing here. You have all these little engines, all this little good stuff, and you can just keep binding. I mean, it's mainly binding front row stuff, but still you can kind of force your opponent to just lose their stuff and not get it back. And you can, like I said, this deck also draws a ton, and pretty much why would this deck even be viable? Well, this deck can be actually pretty scary. You're facing a deck that says, hey, I'm gonna keep multi-attacking, gain really high numbers that will hit over your defenses, and then on top of that you have to bind your board, and I'm just gonna keep smacking you in the face. And a lot of decks just can't deal with this. They also runs the book, which is actually really interesting to see. So what's really nice about this book is that you can counterblast 3, draw 3, and then you can get a front row for 10k, which is good because then it goes over, you know, your opponent's defenses. But also the deck souls a lot, so you can, the cost isn't that costly. The deck doesn't use Counterblast too much, but it does use quite a bit. But it's a very good thing you can just use and see, and then you can kind of end game there. This front row is actually really strong, as the cards already hit for pretty high numbers, and you're pretty much telling your opponent, hey, can you hit 2 defenses for me real quick? Oh, you can't? All right, I guess you just lose here, because usually defenses do shut this deck down, and this is one of the best ways to help with that. On top of the fact that you're drawing a ton, which is good for you because you're going to be binding anyway. So it's good stuff. It's good stuff. I really like it. I think this deck has been in a good spot for a while. The deck, when it came out, it was good, and then it got more support, and then, you know, no one's really been playing it too much aside from premium, but, you know, I do think it's still viable. It's still a viable deck. I think it's very viable. Next, we have Tyler with an Angel Feather list here. So this is a very standard, like, kind of what people have been playing with Angel Feather. It's probably one of the go-to lists. This is kind of like where you want to start with your list, and then kind of venture out from here. You have the very, very, like, to the point Angel. You have the Gavriel, the Hamiel, the new stuff, the old stuff, the old stuff, the new stuff, the old stuff, the searching, more old stuff, and the combination. Pretty much you just have all your rescue checks, and then you have stuff that helps you rescue check better, and then you have stuff that gets you to higher damage, so your opponent can Keel Guard, and then you just kind of win. Now, we haven't talked about Angel Feather yet. Why is this deck win? This deck says if I check crits, you lose the game, because you have guard restrict, you have really high numbers, and you have a rear guard that can attack you for 4, 5, 6 crit with 100k power. It would be between 80 to 100k, and a lot of decks just can't handle that, so they just insta lose. This is one of the boogeymen. This is the other boogeyman. Prism's the boogeyman, and then you have this boogeyman, and both decks have really high ceilings when they hit really hard, and, you know, they kind of just do a thing. Sometimes this deck just steamrolls, sometimes Prism steamrolls. This deck can steamroll faster than Prism can, because Prism takes longer, but this deck can also brick as fast as it's hit steamroll. So you kind of just have, like, your bricking is literally not hitting crits, right? So very, very strong. And with the additions of the grade 2 and the grade 1, it got a lot better. Why did the grade 2 grade 1 matter? This deck literally lets you pick up any card you want. It plays like a Column Bard in Grand Blue, so you pick up your stuff. It also gains boost, which is just nice because it just makes your stuff just a little bit higher than, like, you know, like a booster, but then like a grade 1 booster. But then you also have this card that literally says bind itself, counterblast bind itself, and then you essentially you put an extra damage in your draw and in your damage zone. It's really good because this deck countercharges so much anyway off of all the skills, and then on top of that, you're also putting yourself at higher damage, which means Cameo can go live a little bit faster. But on top of that, you're denying your opponent. You say you put yourself to 5 with using like 2 or 3 of these, right? And your opponent's at 2. They can only heal on that 5th damage, which means they have to heal on that 5th damage specifically. Now, granted, let's say you didn't do that and you were at 3. Your opponent has a lot of chances to heal. They can take 4 damage and heal potentially 2 to 3 times. So that's why this card just added a lot more momentum to all that. So it's just really good stuff to see. But that's Angel Feather. That's it for the EU stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about NA. That's our final one. So let's go into some NA. This is Kevin Cho. This is the same list we saw. They got first place. The same exact list that we saw in AO. It's the same guy, same list. So we're not going to go too far in it, but as you can see, Prism dominating as per usual. Next, we have Toby with the exact same list, dominating as well. They got first and second place, so that is that. Third place, we have Suo with Angel Feather. Now, this one has a little bit of an extra spice to it. Me and Toko were kind of going crazy over this card. This card says if you have 5 cards in your damage zone, you get a boost and 20k power, and this was very well played. There were times where the person that was playing this deck purposely swung with the Hamiel first. I actually commentated a lot of this person's game, so I actually know kind of how this deck functioned because I was literally there. So this was the NA stuff, so I actually saw a lot of these games a lot because I was in the top 8 commentating as well, aside from just Swiss rounds. So they pretty much they had like a Hamiel swing for like 100k with like 4 crit on it, and they purposely swung with the Hamiel first so they wouldn't heal out of their damage. So they put themselves to 5 so this would be live, and then they just swung and the opponent literally lost off of it. It was really cool stuff to see. Very good. But overall, the deck does play exactly the same to the one we saw previously. The biggest difference is this card right here. Everything else is pretty much the same. You do your stuff, you rescue check, you gain lots of crits, and you win. And that's why they got pretty far. The only thing they couldn't beat was Prism, and a lot of it probably just had to do with that they didn't see crits in time or whatever, because like I said, the decks kind of are pretty even in power level in terms of like bashing each other in the face, and it really just comes down to, did you hit enough crits to kill them fast enough, and you just kind of hope you do. Kogze with the Maelstrom list. This is the list that a lot of people were very surprised to see. Why did this list win? Well, this list deals with Heal Guardians extremely well. This list there's this card right here says that gets 10k power and you can only guard with one card for the rest of the turn. So why does this matter? Well, in a format where almost nobody's running 20k shields, this matters a lot. This is almost pretty much unguardable, and we actually watched this in action. We watched a Prism player like really struggle against this. So it was just crazy to watch. But this is the first win con essentially. You ride into this. You have your Maelstrom in your soul, and then you just go, hey, now you can only guard one card pretty much for the rest of the game, because essentially you can just keep doing this every turn as long as you have a counter blast. Your opponent also can't intercept as well, so you can't use any extra shield. You literally just have to hope that you hit a defense, and I hope you have enough 15k guards to deal with a lot of these, because the 10ks won't be enough for you in a lot of situations. Now Prism does have a way out of this. They can Ellie, and Ellie says it becomes 20k, but that's like one time, and you have to deal with multiple attacks. This isn't Excel clan, and you kind of just die. Now it does have a second win con, and the win con is actually right here. You can have your Vanguard restand, and you have all these little on hits and all this extra stuff that kind of enables these on hits. But also we have cards here that give you extra drives, so you can essentially call a bunch of like these cards out, get extra drive on your Maelstrom Torm, and turn and make your Maelstrom Torm even more aggressive. We have these on hit cards, but we also have cards that help with dealing with the on hits, so you can essentially search out all your Maelstroms as quickly as possible. As you guys can see, we're kind of seeing them here, so you can use them, and you know, if you hit, you do stuff, and then you can also restand. Now some of these on hits will just go off anyway based off of the skills and how the skills work, and then you can also counter charge with this little guy back here. But honestly, you can also rest them, give a unit 5k, so you can give the 5k to your Vanguard. All this little stuff that the deck does. It also runs crits, and you might be wondering why in the world would you want to run crits. Well, you have like this is like kind of second win con. You give all these drives to this Maelstrom right here, right? You give all the drives to them, and then your opponent pretty much has to guard this, because if it's like a 4 drive or 5 drive and they're running this many crits, you can just instantly lose. And then they can restand this, by the way. They can restand this, and then they're going to do it again. And if they put any crits on this, you're going to lose. If this, say they hit 2 crits, now they're restanding with 32k power and 3 critical on it. So it's kind of like a little, it's no wonder they call this Overlord the Tier Dragon. You can essentially restand and have a really high crit pressure. And then of course we have the dragon here, the Riptide Dragon. This thing can literally just kill you because it's a 32k swinging rear guard. And like Toku went on a whole rant on this, probably way better rant than me, but you know, like a lot of people would want to run fronts in this deck or opt to run fronts because of the Maelstrom, but then you're only giving yourself one win con. This deck has 2 ways to win, and it's no wonder it's been winning, because it did a beautiful job. But we watched this on stream. I didn't get a chance to commentate it. The people that did commentate knew way more about this deck than I did, but we were able to see an amazing match come out of this. Now the only downside is if your opponent lands enough defenses, you can shut down turns really quickly, but if you don't land defenses, you just lose. You just kind of lose to this deck. There's only so many times you can guard, especially like again with Heal Guardians being in meta. This deck says, hi, so I heard you're not running Heal Guardians. Cool, I'm gonna end your life real quick. And that's essentially what's going on here. Overall, a very good deck. This deck in the current meta is like perfect. It may be possible, maybe in other metas this deck might fall off, but right now with the way the meta is, this deck is built to deal with the current meta. It does a really good job of it. So there we go, congratulations, really fun stuff. Next we have another Blue Wire deck. I'm not gonna go into detail too much about it. This was I'm gonna butcher this, so I'm gonna try my best. Nihui Dang. This is Nihoi Dang. I'm trying so hard. Toku tried teaching me and I kind of failed, but I'm trying so hard. But this is Nihoi Dang. And then next we have Adrian. This is another Luar deck here. So just Luar doing Luar things, you know, just another deck. And they do have their searchers at max. We've talked about this deck quite a lot, so we're gonna go ahead and go into our Tywer's deck. This is another list of pretty much what we saw first and second place. So we're not gonna go into this. We've already seen this deck. Last but not least, Grand Blue. This is Ichi playing good old Grand Blue over here. Pretty good stuff. This is yet another pretty interesting deck. I do like that they're going also for the mill engine here. They just want to end games as quickly as possible. You notice that there's Tommy the Ghosties in this deck. The reason for it is because they probably want to see their G cards. Grand Blue does struggle against multi-attacking Excel decks, so you do want to see those G guards as soon as possible, and that's why they run the Tommy the Ghosties here. We also have just a normal Ghost Ship engine, all this stuff. I don't think I talked about why this deck wins. I think I talked about, but I never talked about why it's winning or why it has some success. Now, as you notice, it's not as commonly seen as, you know, like the other decks have been seen, but it does show some representation. A lot of it has to do with just the fact that this deck does beat down Prism pretty easily. Prism being the boogeyman. This deck does deal with it mainly because of Skull Dragons. You can also farm, which means you can deal with Angel Feather Turn a little bit better. You also have constant multi-attacking, constant pressure, and a lot of decks just can't handle that much pressure that you provide. And if you're milling and you start whipping out those dragons and they're smacking for 40, 50, 60, 70, and you're not running perfect guards, or you're running less perfect guards, or you're running perfect guards but you're running like like a half split or whatever, you're gonna start losing. You're gonna start losing really fast. So that's why this deck does have a way of succeeding. The deck's win con is not too hard to achieve. As long as you don't completely brick, you will achieve your stuff, and you're probably gonna win. A lot of the times you won't win is if your opponent is holding perfect guards. That's kind of when you'll start seeing the deck get lower a little bit. But if your opponent doesn't get to the perfect guards in time, you can pretty much just end games. So that's it. That's all the lists. That's all the stuff. Let me go back to my main screen. Let me just go back. I'm back, and that was a lot of talking, a lot of just back and forth. I hope that's explaining some of these lists and showing you kind of like what decks have been doing, what they're showing, and what they're just in general, like how they've been winning, and what has brought us here to this current meta. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a diversity. It's not insane, but there is some diversity. Of course, we still have Bermuda Triangle and Bermuda Triangle and Angel Feather and Luard kind of dominating the meta right now, but there are a couple other decks that are viable, also doing pretty well. The only thing I'm surprised about is that we didn't see a single Uranus deck, and we didn't see a single Golds deck. Those are the big things that I was expecting to see and we didn't see. I'm not too surprised. I actually think the Vanquisher deck is a little bit better right now than Golds. Golds has a lot of free I just win here games, but Vanquisher I think is more consistent, and that's why I'm not surprised that we saw that. I'm not surprised by Link Joker either, because it's just another different type of force deck that just beats your face in, and it's just good. Obviously we saw the Grand Blues. Grand Blues just overall in a good spot right now, so it's just gonna do well. And of course Luard's in a good spot, and of course Prism and Angel Feather are also just doing their thing, where they just win games and they just do their stuff. But I hope this was informative. Hope you enjoyed what I had to provide. Hope it helps you in your meta research or your deck research or whatever it is that you're trying to do. We are going to be in a moment here where things are going to kind of calm down, and we're not going to be seeing anything for a while, like in terms of like regionals or regional type things, but that's okay. You can start using this information to start setting up for future clan collections that are coming, and start getting ready for Spring Fest that will be next year. It will be in like pretty much 6 months, so start now. Start looking into what these decks are doing, what you can do to make your deck better. Start looking into these metas. Why is this the meta that it is? But now, guys, I'm gonna peace out, say bye, and all that stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, concerns, things, if you are part of this, if your deck is in here, please feel free to comment below and tell me that it's you, and be like, yo, that's me, that's my list, oh my god, and all that excitement. You can do that below. I'll happily be like, yay, congratulations, all the fun stuff, all the fun stuff that you can do. But now, guys, I'm gonna go and peace out. So peace out, das vidania, see you guys next time, all that fun stuff. Thank you for the support and the love and everything. Stay happy, stay awesome. Till next time, bye.